The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Today, what we're going to do is we're going to wait for just a minute whilst we try to just get a few more people coming in and finish their registration, and then we'll start the call at 1 minute past. Whilst we're waiting, we'll just quickly go through the key points in terms of what we're going to raise today. The session today is about a knowledge sharing and sharing some of the experiences and business relevance of some of the applications which are used as a enabler to fix business problems. They're a little bit different in terms of the apps. One's a very targeted application for the professional buyer, the buyer workbench. The other one's a simple little application to help rogue invoices get back into the invoice processing process. What we'll now do is we'll start the webinar. And in terms of the agenda, what I'd like to do is just quickly give a brief overview of Cordis Solutions. Then we're going to talk about the applications. And in the application, the key focus is, as we said, talked about knowledge sharing. Why was this app created? What benefit and problem was it targeted to address? And then we'll do a live demonstration or walkthrough of the application. That will then take us to about 1:45, where we will have some Q&A time for you guys to ask questions. If you do want to ask questions, please can we ask you to use the question tab in the webinar box, and then our adjudicator Juliana will then forward the questions to the relevant presenter for answering. In terms of your presenters today, we have myself. My name is Ramesh Vasani. I'm one of the solution architects at Cordis Solutions, and I will talk a little bit about the MyInvoiceScan application and the purpose behind it. The other presenter we have is again another old seasoned SAP veteran. Actually, David's younger than he looks, so he's actually not a veteran per se, but never mind. He's got lots of experience. David's going to talk about some of the experience and knowledge share in particular. I think this is where we're going to see some real business benefits and drivers, where this application is designed for the professional buyer, and David will share some of the experiences which is currently undergoing with the implementation at an existing customer. In terms of Cordis Solutions, the Cordis Solutions is one of a sister company from the Accelerated group of companies. One of its sister companies is Accelerated Source to Pay, which David may refer to later on, but that's how we're related. Cordis's angle on SAP has been to make SAP easier to use, and in terms of improving integration, control and compliance, making simple applications to help people adopt and use a process, as opposed to be forced and trained to use a process. Again, one of the things which we found that simplification helps. Simplification helps to address 4 out of the 5 big reasons of why people do not follow business processes, or 5 reasons of why business problems happen. Problems happen in business because people are not adequately trained, They don't know what to do. They don't know how to do it, which URL to use. No one told them about the upgrade that happened. If we use the application is easy to find and simple to use, then it helps address 4 of those items, 1, 2, 3, and 5. One of the biggest problems is some things go wrong in business is because you got the wrong person. No matter what type of application you have, it's not going to fix. If you got the wrong person, you got the wrong person. HR needs to get involved and fix that. We can't help you with that one. But 1 to 4, 1, 2, 3, and 5, what we're showing you in this webinar will help you address those items. So now I'm going to go into InvoiceScan, a little bit of positioning. InvoiceScan was set up to pick up rogue invoices which happen because things will go wrong in business, and to get them back into the invoice processing process. The idea behind InvoiceScan is it sits as an application in the SAP Cloud Platform, and all it requires is a URL for people to then take an invoice, a picture of an invoice, and it will then put it into the organization's invoice processing process, whether it's through OpenText or Ariba, it doesn't mind. Let me show you a little bit of how it works. So typically what happens, you put InvoiceScan and you install it onto a phone or any device, a handheld device. Once it's been downloaded from the App Store and put onto the handheld device, the user or that device is registered in SAP Cloud Platform. And as soon as it's got a unique customer number, anything that happens now with that application, the unique customer ID knows where to send the image and the data that it just received. So let's see it in, first of all, in pictorial form, and then we'll have a live demo. The live demo is a little bit boring because it's quite very simple and it's over in a few seconds. Okay, so when I hit this item, you get the vendor. You can fill in you can have as many or as few fields as you want. You can put in the vendor field. You can take a picture with the phone of the invoice, and you can put in some notes if you want. Once you've done that, you can simply press a submit button and it will go. If you don't want to press submit button, or you want to use the item on a desktop, you can. Here you can see the similar screen as we had with the mobile item, but it's a bit more compressed. And because we're using HTML5, it's totally scalable and how it's been presented. Once you've done that and you've filled in the basic elements, if I'm going to do this on my laptop right now, it's going to ask me where do I want to pick up the image from, and hence I get that attachments folder. If I'm going to do it on a desktop with a camera on it, I get that option. Do you want to use photos, cameras, OneDrive, whatever? And I simply choose where the image is. So if I haven't taken the image, I simply pick up my phone over the invoice and take a picture. As soon as I've done that, I press submit, it's done. InvoiceScan, as a simple app, has got this rogue invoice which didn't have a purchase order. Now you may say, well, hold on, why are we supporting a process when we should be enforcing a no PO, no pay policy? Because we've been realistic. I may have a situation where I'm a branch manager in a bank. My staff's done an excellent piece of work, and we want to celebrate this afternoon. I go down to the local Procuring, order some sandwiches and a couple of bottles of champagne. Procuring come and deliver the champagne and some sandwiches. After the banks close, we're having a small celebration. When they deliver the sandwiches and the champagne, they also give me an invoice in my hand. I got approval for this small celebration from my regional manager, but I didn't get a purchase order. I didn't get a requisition. I just want to put this small item into the system by simply taking an image of it, saying the vendor's pret a manger, regional managers approved it, it's in my system. And that's what it's designed to address. The rogue invoices which happen, which may not necessarily be a contravention of my policy, but we know things like this will happen. Another example which we tackled was a member of my staff's not well and I need to send them some flowers. I'm not going to go around creating a purchase order for these type of items. I'm just going to be reactive. Go to the florist, get the flowers. Florist gives me an invoice. I want it back into the system. Yeah. So that's what it's designed to do. It is not designed to circumvent the purchase requisition, purchase order, goods receipt, service confirmation, and invoice process. It's merely there to support something that happens. So once I hit that link, I will get onto this screen over here, and I will now do the live demo. As you can see, as soon as I hit that screen, I've got HANA on demand at the top. So it's sitting in HANA, and I simply put in the vendor number. If I know Café Rouge or Pret a Manger, whatever I can spell, notes approved by regional manager. Small celebration. And I hit the button attachment. In this case, because I'm doing it from my machine, I'm going to hit the browse button, and it's going to go look for some item on my machine. So I'm just going to go to the demo section in my machine, and I'm going to attach an invoice, an item. So let's an image, whatever I want. So let's attach an image of an invoice. And because of this customer ID at the top, it knows exactly what to do. In this case, we've set up demo at accelerated ES2P to go into a Vim site situation. So when I submit, it's now gone. If I opened up Vim, the item's going to be in there. And that's it. If you have any questions, happy to take them at the end. And on this note, I'm going to now hand over to David to tell us a little bit about the bulk of our application. But before I do that, Juliana just reminded me there's one more slide which talks about the architecture. And the architecture is very simple. We saw everything on the HANA Cloud platform. From there, it's ascertaining from the customer ID whether it goes into someone's on-premise Vim system or a Cloud Ariba system, but the app is sitting on someone's phone or tablet or whatever. So very, very simple infrastructure. No hardware, no training, nothing required. David, over to you.
Thank you, Ramesh. So we're going to start looking at the MyBuyersWorkBench solution. So a bit of information, a bit of background as to how this has come about. So a professional buyer working with an ERP system such as SAP would have a number of different parts they would need to process, very much looking at direct procurement. With all of those parts, it's quite difficult using standard functionality to find all that information and look at all the data that they need in order to make an informed decision. One of the areas that they would need to look at would be purchase requisition lines. So that's very detailed. There's no aggregation as part of the standard solution. It's also difficult to reassign parts to colleagues, other buyers within the purchasing department. Errors may occur when that data is being reassigned. So, for example, purchasing group could be used to reassign parts, which has its own complications. So, for example, the part has a purchasing group, so does the requisition line information as well. So, how is that? How can that be reassigned en masse, as well as keeping the integrity of the master data intact? Looking into the system, so looking into previous purchase orders, previous schedule agreements, previous contracts to try and get a picture of how a part has been sourced in the past, whether or not there is relevant schedule agreements or contracts which could be extended for this part, is also quite tricky and time consuming to find. And then there's the actual aggregating or grouping together of those requisition lines to create purchase orders or RFQs to then go on to be sourced. So that activity is also quite time consuming and a bit clunky in using the standard functionality. Sometimes customers have developed off-system solutions, typically using Excel or Access to try and manage this. But the MyBuyersWorkBench solution takes this a step further and makes this whole process much more simpler and easier. So the solution comprises of two different parts, and it's all about simplifying and automating the processing and reporting of part data. The first part of the tool looks at the transactional elements. So that's looking at aggregating part information and being able to process that and manage that within a purchasing department. And the other part of the solution looks at the reporting to support that. So making sure that there is status information available, there's trend analysis information available, looking at KPIs, and making sure that the procurement department has the right balance of parts allocated to buyers to run efficiently. The tool has been built based on best practice and also with practitioner experience. And it's a web-based tool using some of the latest SAP Fury technology. So there's an intuitive, nice look and feel for the user. It has direct integration with SAP MM, so we can create purchase orders and RFQs instantly from the tool. And there's a suite of reports that supports the functionality. We provide three different roles for using the workbench. The first one is the transactional operational buyer. So they can search for update parts, process parts. And there's a really neat feature of the tool, which is when a part comes onto the queue, we can automatically route that to the relevant buyer. So you could have a buyer who's responsible for a group of commodities or who is more specialist, and we have logic already built into the tool that routes that part to that buyer to make that process more accurate and more efficient. Then we have managers, senior managers, head of department role, where they can look at some of the information to a level of detail that fits their requirements, but they can mainly look at focusing on the reports, trying to understand the workloads across the departments and using that information to balance that, have an indication of how long it takes for parts to be processed off the queue, and look at volumes and analyze that over time. And then, as you'd expect with any solution, there's an administrator role which keeps the solution up to date. So if there are changes required for the joiners, movers, leavers process, or parts need to be moved when somebody's off ill or on annual leave, or configuration changes that need to be applied, there's an administrator role that covers those requirements. MyBuyersWorkbench sits on the SAP HANA Cloud platform, and also uses the integration gateway. So as you can see here, typical demand would be created in an SAP ERP system. Doesn't necessarily have to be SAP. That demand then comes through as purchase requisitions onto the MyBuyersWorkbench, which then gets aggregated. So you could have a demand which goes over several weeks, months, or even years. We aggregate that together, and then we manage that requirement. So we've got a couple of options there. For any reason, if that requirement did not fit the minimum criteria, we could reject that off of the buyer's work queue, but the majority of cases we would then process it. So we can either distribute that out, so reassign it to other people, other buyers within the department, or create a purchase order or create an RFQ automatically. You can see here we are looking at a couple of innovations to link with SAP Ariba Network. So in the future, we're looking at pushing things directly into Ariba. But at the moment, supported functionality would be to create a purchase order that would go across the Ariba network and out to a supplier. Or if an RFQ is created, we can use Ariba to complete the sourcing activities and really sort of benefiting from that integration. There are other products that are available that the Buyers Workbench also integrates with, so things like SAP sourcing, or you can convert your RFQs using standard SAP functionality. So I'll just show you a demonstration of how the tool works. So logging on, there would either be a link from the home page or a link from a procurement page, and you have the option of either using single sign-on or using a log-on to SAP Fury like I am doing here. So once you log on, there is a launchpad, and the launchpad can contain links to many products, SAP Fury products, or just in this case, the Buyer's Workbench. So we have the Workbench, which is the transactional application or the reporting tool. So I'll start off by looking at the Buyer's Workbench. So when the buyer goes into the Workbench, the screen will be presented with parts which are grouped together, either red, amber, or green status. They have the option to see all of the parts that are assigned to them, or all of the parts that are available on the workbench for being processed. So the way that we group parts together, either red, amber, or green, is we look at the most urgent requisition line of that part, and we then do a calculation to say how soon is it required from today's date. So what can be achieved is that you could have a procurement SLA, and you can vary this depending on how urgent you need to source your parts, or if you've got commodity strategies, we can link that in with the tool as well. So as we see, we've got 2 parts which are in overdue status and 3 parts that are in amber status, so need to be sourced within the next 30 days. If I have a look at one of the parts, a text-based part in this example, we have the information at the top of the screen providing more information to the buyer on the dates, and also purchasing information, so information from the purchase requisition. There are some actions that can be recorded. These are fully customizable, so you can have drop-down statuses selectable from a range that meets your needs. And there's also the ability to record comments. So one of the big challenges is when working on parts, if there's correspondence, then that's typically on email or on other sources. But what we can do is we can store those comments against the part on the buyer's workbench, so that any buyer who looks at this part, if it gets reassigned to another buyer, they can see the full history. Another example here is a part here. So we've got a bit more information, mainly coming from the material master. And because it's a part, we can have a look and see if there are any existing purchasing documents available, and we show the information around them, so scheduled agreements, contracts. And we can also see as well if there are any previous purchase orders available and display the most recent information relating to them as well. So that was a quick tour around the transactional part of the buyer's work queue. There's also a dashboard provided. So we have a number of reports that are available here. The reports are in 4 different categories. So we have status reports looking at information, parts on the buyer's workbench that are updated every 24 hours. We have trend reports looking at things like stored reasons, burn down, which are updated every week. And we have KPI reports looking at time it takes to either have a part go through to sourcing or have a part being processed and closed off of the workbench. And also we have weekly changes, which is a tabular report. So if I just have a look at one of these reports, looking at the KPIs, so we can have several different filtering criteria, and we can use that criteria to update the KPI metrics depending on what we're interested in. Okay, so here's a couple of other examples. So we're looking at the leader dashboard here, which allows us to drill down based on the organization or the procurement department's hierarchy. So looking at the head of procurement right the way down to the buyers who've had parts assigned to them. And we RAG status those parts as well. Burn down trends. So this is a future projection and historical report looking at parts that are being processed over time and the statuses that they were in once they were processed, and also looking to forward project what status parts are in when they're estimated to be closed or sourcing completed by. So the idea behind this chart is to make sure that the parts remain in green or amber status whilst they're being processed on the work queue. And we've got the demand raised red or amber. So this is when parts requirement comes onto the work queue. We RAG status them at that point, so we can understand the behavior of the business to see how many parts are put in with insufficient time for procurement to process them, or with very minimal time for procurement to process them within your agreed SLA with the business. And then that can then trigger follow-on conversations to try and adjust that behavior. Weekly changes. So this is a tabular report looking at the differences where we can look at quite specifically down to buyer level. So how many parts they processed that which are within each of the RAG status categories. So are they focusing on the overdue ones? Are they being more preventative and looking at the future demands and processing that? So just to summarize then, so MyBuyersWorkBench allows the procurement department to manage and prioritize all outstanding direct procurement parts on one application. We've got special logic to automatically route parts to buyers for processing. We have up to 49 columns available for filtering and sorting, so that the screen that we showed can be adjusted to meet specific buyer needs. There's the integration for creating purchase orders and RFQs directly within ERP, so no need to go from the MyBuyersWorkbench into ERP in order to complete activities. And there's the ability to download plant information to Excel for further analysis.
Thank you, David. This takes us on to our questions and answer section. And we've got a couple of questions, which I'm going to see if I can get David to answer the first one. David, I'm reading it out. It says, My Buyer Work Queue, what's a typical installation time for the project?
Yeah, it's a good question. So typically, we'd work with the customer to implement it within a 3-month period.
Okay. Another question also on the buyer work queue. What sort of architecture into the system landscape does it need?
So it integrates with the SAP ECC system, and there's an option to either have an embedded gateway or a separate gateway environment set up to support that. But that's something which we could talk through with the customer as part of the implementation.
We don't have any more questions. If we'll keep it open for another few minutes, a few seconds. If you guys have got any more questions, then fine. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll close the session and thank you everybody for attending. It looks like we don't have any more questions. And on that note, I'd like to thank everybody for attending this webinar. And if you do need any more information, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at cordisolutions.com or the info email account as well, which is on the screen. And either Julian or David and I will come back to you. Thank you.